On the humid edges of northern Luzon, long before the world knew his name, one quiet American soldier walked through waist-high elephant grass with a rifle that made even his own platoon laugh. They teased him for ordering it through a magazine ad. A mail-order gun, they called it. In an army full of standard-issue weapons, he stood out like a misfit carrying a toy in a war sculpted by steel and blood. To them, it looked ridiculous. To him, it felt right. The early months of 1944 had turned the Pacific into a furnace. Japanese snipers had carved terror into the jungles of the Philippines. They dug into palm groves, perched in banyan trees, and hid inside caves carved into volcanic stone. American patrols advanced one ridge at a time, losing men every few hundred yards. The enemy they faced didn't retreat, didn't surrender, and didn't miss. But one soldier, armed with a rifle nobody respected, would soon change the entire rhythm of those battles. The men in his unit thought he was strange from the very beginning. He didn't drink, rarely spoke, and spent every spare moment cleaning and re-cleaning that rifle. While others played cards or smoked, he quietly examined the bolt, polished the action, adjusted the sights. They joked he treated the thing like a newborn child. "Why don't you use a real weapon? Maybe Sears can send you a better one. Bet that thing falls apart the first time you fire it." He only smiled softly, never firing back with words. In his mind, the rifle was more than metal. It was instinct, memory, something he trusted in a place where trust kept you alive. The truth was, he had used army rifles before. He didn't hate them, but the weapon in his hands wasn't chosen for power. It was chosen because it fit him. The length was perfect. The sights felt natural. The balance matched the way he breathed. And this quiet connection would soon face the deadliest test imaginable. By late March, the battalion had pushed deeper into the foothills, climbing toward Japanese defensive nests that had resisted every attempt to dislodge them. 11 snipers, the deadliest marksmen of their regiment, had positioned themselves along a ridge overlooking the American advance. They had already killed several U.S. soldiers and pinned down entire squads for hours at a time. Nobody could spot them. Nobody could move without risking a bullet. Any man who tried to climb the ridge never came down alive. Fear seeped into every voice on the radio. Even the veterans grew silent. And in this tension, the quiet soldier with the mail-order rifle stepped forward for the first time. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a simple, calm decision as he slung his pack and walked toward the jungle line. His commanding officer turned, startled. "Where the hell are you going?" "Sir, I think I can find them." The captain stared at him, at the odd rifle, at the calm eyes behind it, and for a moment didn't know whether to laugh or refuse, but the truth was they had run out of options. Something had to be done before more men died. "Fine," the captain muttered, "but take someone with you." He shook his head gently. "No, sir. I need to move alone." A strange silence followed. Then the officer nodded once. "Go." And with that, the man the platoon had mocked stepped into the green darkness alone, toward a ridge haunted by 11 invisible killers. The jungle swallowed him whole. The moment he entered the trees, he changed. His quiet steps became soundless. His breathing slowed. His senses sharpened as if the forest itself whispered clues. The jokes about his rifle faded behind him, replaced by the heavy stillness of the hunt. And somewhere ahead, hidden in branches, leaves, and shadows, 11 of Japan's most patient, deadly marksmen waited to kill the next man foolish enough to climb toward them. They had no idea that the man approaching wasn't foolish at all. He was the only one prepared. And this would become the first day of 4 that would turn the mail-order rifle into legend,
and silence every voice that had ever mocked him.
The jungle changed as he moved deeper. The sunlight faded into broken green shadows, each one layered with hidden danger. Vines hung like ropes from the canopy, and every distant rustle could have been a lizard or a sniper adjusting his scope. Most soldiers felt watched in a place like this. But he didn't fear the silence. He listened to it. His mail-order rifle felt warm in his hands. He'd polished its wooden stock so often that the grain almost glowed. But now the moisture of the jungle made it slick. He wiped it gently on his sleeve and continued forward, counting each step in his mind. He moved as if he had walked these trails his whole life. Up ahead, the ridge rose sharply like a wall of green. That was where the Japanese snipers were. Somewhere among the rocks and roots, 11 men had dug themselves into perfect firing positions. They were masters of patience, assassins trained to wait hours without blinking. American soldiers died without ever seeing the flash of a rifle. He took a knee beside a large fallen tree and scanned the ridge through his sights. Nothing. Nothing but trees, branches, stillness. But he knew better. Stillness could hide everything. For long minutes he waited, letting the jungle breathe. Sweat rolled down his spine, but he didn't shift, didn't scratch, didn't move a muscle. The slightest twitch could reveal him. And then he saw it. Not a man, not a rifle, just a leaf moving the wrong way. The air was calm, no breeze, but that one dry leaf trembled ever so slightly in the shadow of a thick branch. Someone was up there, exhaling carefully, disturbing the air around him. A lesser soldier might have fired immediately, but he didn't. He memorized the angle, the height, the depth of the shadow. He let his breath settle. The jungle was watching, the ridge was watching, and finally, he was ready. He pressed the butt of the rifle firmly into his shoulder. Inhale, exhale. A single shot cracked across the stillness, sharp, clean, confident. A faint cry echoed from the ridge. Something heavy tumbled through branches and thudded against the earth. His first kill. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just lowered his rifle, calm as ever. Because he knew the truth. If he heard a cry, then 10 more snipers had heard it too, and now they knew someone was coming for them. He slid deeper into the undergrowth, using roots and boulders as cover. He moved fast but silently, weaving through shadows as if he belonged to them. A Japanese round snapped past his ear, shaving a branch clean in half. Another shot dug into the mud inches from his knee. He didn't flinch. Instead, he dropped flat behind a cluster of ferns and studied the angles. The shot had come from high on the left, too quick to aim properly. The sniper had fired in panic, not patience. That meant he was inexperienced, or both. He crawled like a lizard across the ground, pushing himself uphill with elbows and knees. Every inch he gained tilted the odds back in his favor. Finally, he reached a ridge of volcanic stone. He rested his cheek against its cool surface and angled his rifle upward. He waited, not for a movement, but for a mistake. It came faster than he expected. A sniper shifted his rifle ever so slightly, and the sun glinted off the scope for half a second. That was all he needed. He fired once, and the glint vanished forever. 2 down. But the ridge was alive now. Japanese voices whispered through the foliage. Shots cracked at random intervals, testing the air. They couldn't see him, but they felt him, like a ghost climbing towards them. He knew he had to move on. Any second they'd flank him. He pulled himself onto a narrow shelf of rock, and suddenly the world opened around him. The ridge stretched like a broken spine, dotted with trees and jagged stones. Somewhere up there, 9 snipers were aligning their rifles towards the sound of his last shot. He steadied himself and scanned quickly. A shape,
Low, crouched, moved behind a rotted stump. He aimed fast. Another shot. Another body dropped. 3. By now, the Japanese snipers were no longer hunters. They were prey trying to reposition before he reached them. But it was too late. He had momentum, he had rhythm, and the rifle they mocked, that mail-order toy, had become an instrument of pure precision. He moved again, higher, faster. A shot grazed his sleeve, almost tearing fabric, but he ignored it. A twig snapped beneath someone's foot 20 yards away. He pivoted, fired, and the sound of a collapsing body echoed through the brush. 4. The ridge was unraveling. Snipers began retreating, shifting positions, abandoning their perfect nests. They had never imagined one American, alone, would climb headfirst into their kill zone. But he wasn't just climbing. He was hunting. And the jungle had already chosen its side.
The ridge grew steeper as he climbed, its rocks sharp like broken teeth jutting out of the earth. Every few feet, the jungle shifted from dense vines to bare stone, forcing him to change his movements constantly. One moment he crawled like a snake. The next, he clung to roots just to pull himself upward. His breathing stayed slow, even, controlled. The same steady rhythm he used while sighting his rifle. He was in Japanese territory now, deep inside it. A strange calm settled around him. Most soldiers felt their pulse thunder in their ears before a firefight, but he had the opposite reaction. The more danger he sensed, the quieter he became inside. It was as if his mind narrowed into a long, straight lane, and everything beyond that lane faded into mist. The forest was no longer his enemy. It was his ally. A sudden cracking sound, like bamboo splintering, snapped across the ridge. Not loud, not obvious, but unmistakable. A sniper shifting position. He froze instantly, pressing himself flat against a boulder, eyes scanning the branches above. Movement. A shadow pulled back behind a tree trunk. He saw only a hint, but that was enough. He adjusted his aim, angled carefully through 2 leaves, and fired. The bullet struck bark and then flesh. A body slumped sideways, sliding down the tree in silence. 5. The rest of the snipers scattered. He could hear them now, whispers, hurried rustling, the soft thuds of boots moving across moss-covered stones. They were speaking urgently, trying to assess where he was, how he was advancing, why their formation was collapsing so quickly. This wasn't supposed to happen. One American wasn't supposed to climb into their nest alone. One American wasn't supposed to take out 5 trained shooters. And worst of all, he wasn't supposed to keep coming. He moved again, weaving through fallen logs. His fingers traced the bark as he passed, using touch to guide his balance. Twice he paused, not because he was tired, but because he sensed danger waiting in the silence. The jungle, he believed, often spoke without sound. He reached a cluster of large volcanic stones and crouched low. From here, he had a full view of the eastern slope, a narrow path leading to a fortified hideout. The Japanese had carved firing positions into the hill itself, camouflaging them with brush and branches. Perfect nests, perfect angles, perfect death traps. He scanned the ridge again and saw something no one else would have noticed. A tiny wisp of smoke, barely a thread, rising from behind a rock. It wasn't a fire. It was breath condensing in the cool air as someone exhaled too quickly. He lowered his head and rolled to the left, silently shifting into a new angle. The sniper fired, expecting him to be where he was, not where he had moved. The bullet shattered stone inches from his shoulder. He exhaled slowly, centered his crosshairs on the faint column of smoke, and squeezed the trigger. A cry echoed, then silence. His 6th kill. But now the ridge exploded. 3 Japanese snipers fired at once. Bullets tore through branches, slammed into rocks, burst mud into the air. One round zipped past his cheek, so close he felt the heat. Another hit a tree trunk behind him, sending wood chips flying. He slid down a natural ditch, using the sloped earth to break line of sight. The enemy wasn't firing blindly. They had triangulated his position. They were trained, disciplined, coordinated. Exactly what he expected. He waited for their next move, and he didn't wait long. One sniper attempted to flank him, circling along the left ridge. He heard footsteps on loose stones. He held his breath, counted the pace, and timed it perfectly. As the sniper stepped into view, rifle raised, he fired a lightning-fast shot. The Japanese soldier dropped without sound. 7. He crawled forward again, sliding across the ridge like water. Another sniper fired wildly from above, panic clear in the angle of the shot. Panic was deadly. Panic revealed location. He fired back once, and the shot found its mark. 8. The last 3 snipers were the most dangerous. He knew this long before he reached them. The worst enemy in any fight wasn't the first soldier or even the strongest. It was the one who survived the longest. Experience sharpened instinct. Fear sharpened focus. These 3 would be the hardest kills. He reached another rocky ledge and stayed low. The jungle here thinned, revealing cliffs that dropped into rolling valleys below. Wind swept across the ridge, carrying away the smoke of gunfire. He inhaled deeply, letting the breeze cool the sweat on his neck. For a moment, the world felt suspended, quiet, still. Then, a glint. A sniper shifted ever so slightly, adjusting his barrel. The sunlight betrayed him for a heartbeat, and that was enough. He aligned his sights, breathed out, and fired. The glint vanished, something collapsed behind the rock. 9. The ridge trembled with movement. Leaves shook, branches twitched. The last 2 snipers were trying to retreat deeper into the mountain trail. But that was their mistake. Retreating created noise. Noise created direction. Direction created opportunity. He pursued them slowly, methodically, like a predator who knew the hunt was nearly over. As he crossed a narrow stone pass, a bullet struck the ground between his boots. Then another, and another. The 10th sniper had set a trap, but he had set it too early. The faint muzzle flash revealed his position. He took one steady shot, and the ridge grew quiet again. 10. Only one remained, the most patient, the most skilled. The sniper the others probably followed, and the quiet American, with the rifle they mocked, wasn't leaving until he found him.
The ridge narrowed into a jagged spine of shale and volcanic stone, the kind that crumbled with every step. Below him, the jungle stretched in waves of dark green. Above him, the sky was a pale wash of sunlight, broken by drifting clouds. But he wasn't looking at the sky, or the jungle, or even the ridge ahead. He was searching for the last sniper. The 10th kill had brought everything to a strange stillness. Birds that had scattered now returned cautiously, hopping across branches. Insects resumed their whispering hum. Even the wind felt softer, as if the jungle itself had paused to watch. But he knew better. Silence didn't mean safety. Sometimes, silence meant the enemy was closer than ever. He crouched behind a large stone, letting his breathing steady. His shirt was torn at the sleeve where a bullet had grazed him. Dirt streaked his face, and the humidity made the rifle slick with moisture. He wiped the stock gently with his thumb, not out of affection, but out of habit. The same habit that had kept him alive all day. Down the ridge he heard the faintest scrape, like metal brushing against rock.
A sniper readying his weapon or trying to reposition? The last one wouldn't panic. He wouldn't move unless forced. He wouldn't reveal himself with sloppy mistakes like the others. No, this one would be deliberate. He pressed himself low and crawled along the ridge, each inch measured, each movement purposeful. His ears tuned to the world around him, listening for the unnatural. A breath, a shift of weight, the whisper of a rifle barrel. Minutes passed. Maybe 5, maybe 10. Time didn't matter on a ridge like this. Only instinct did. He stopped near a cluster of twisted roots clinging to the rock face. A small cave opening, barely the size of a foxhole, hid in their shadow. The darkness inside was absolute, and that was the problem. A perfect sniper didn't hide in plain sight. He hid in the places soldiers wouldn't look, the places too obvious to search. He angled himself carefully and studied the opening. No movement, no glint of metal, no sound. But he felt something, a presence, a watchfulness, like two invisible eyes locked onto him from within that darkness. He shifted his position silently, moving to the side of the opening rather than facing it head-on. Snipers expected soldiers to confront them directly, but he wasn't a typical soldier, and the rifle in his hands wasn't typical either. He slid his boot slowly across the dirt, kicking a loose pebble into the cave. Silence. Then the faintest sound. A breath. Barely audible, but enough. He didn't fire, not yet. Instead, he took a long, controlled inhalation. The last sniper wasn't panicking. He wasn't rushing. He was waiting for the perfect moment to shoot. One shot, one kill. That's all a sniper needed. But the quiet American had no intention of giving him that moment. He angled his rifle toward the cave shadow, adjusted his position one final time, and then tapped the rocky wall with his knuckles. A tiny, sharp sound echoed inside the cave. The last sniper reacted instantly. His rifle barrel darted toward the entrance. A muzzle flash exploded from the darkness. A bullet shattered the rock inches from the American's ear. But he had already moved. He rolled to the left, brought up his rifle, and fired into the darkness before the sound of the enemy's shot had even faded. One shot, one echo, one end. A soft thud came from inside the cave. He exhaled, lowered his rifle, and closed his eyes for a brief second. Not to celebrate, but to acknowledge the danger he had just survived. 11 snipers, 4 days, and he had taken down every single one of them. He climbed slowly into the cave. The sniper lay collapsed against the wall, rifle still in his hands, eyes open in a frozen determination. These men weren't cowards. They weren't amateurs. They were warriors, skilled, disciplined, deadly. And he had faced them all alone. He descended the mountain. His clothes were torn, his arms scratched, his face streaked with sweat and dirt. But he walked in quiet steadiness, the same way he had climbed up. His platoon froze when they saw him. Men stared. Mouths fell open. The officers exchanged glances. Behind him, the ridge that had haunted their advance for days was finally silent. He didn't boast. He didn't speak. He simply wiped his rifle, slung it across his shoulder, and nodded once. And in that moment, no one laughed at the mail-order rifle. Not anymore.
When he stepped into camp, it was as if time froze around him. Soldiers who had been laughing moments earlier fell silent. Others who were cleaning rifles stopped mid-motion, staring as though they'd seen a ghost climb out of the mountain. His uniform was ripped, smeared with dirt and dried sweat. His hat was gone. His face was streaked with scratches. But the rifle they mocked, rested calmly against his shoulder,
Still polished, still steady, still loyal. A medic hurried toward him. "You all right? You hit anywhere?" He shook his head. "Just scratches," he said softly. His voice was steady, controlled, almost too calm for a man who had just walked through 11 snipers alone. That calmness, that unshakable control, was part of what unsettled the men around him. They knew what that ridge had done to patrols stronger than him. They knew how many had died trying to climb it, and yet he had returned, alone. The captain approached next, his expression caught between disbelief and relief. Did you get any of them?" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't boast. He simply answered the way a man would answer a simple question. "All of them, sir." The captain blinked. "All of them?" He nodded once. 11. A wave of murmurs rushed through the camp like wind through tall grass. The number hit the men harder than any explosion. 11 snipers. 11 ghosts hidden in the ridge that no one dared approach. And he had taken out every one of them. The captain swallowed hard, trying to wrap his mind around what he'd just heard. Alone? Yes, sir. The murmurs turned into whispers. Whispers turned into stunned silence. Silence turned into respect. The same soldiers who had teased him, who had laughed at his mail-order rifle, now stared at him as though he carried something sacred. The jokes died on their lips. Not out of guilt, but out of awe. One young private finally spoke. "What kind of rifle is that?" He didn't answer. He simply sat down on an ammunition crate and began cleaning it, the same way he always did. Slow and steady, wiping it with deep care as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Because to him, nothing had. He had simply done what needed to be done. News spread like fire. By the next morning, the story had already traveled beyond the camp. Runners passed it down through neighboring companies. Radio operators whispered it across channels. Officers repeated it with raised eyebrows. Some guy with a civilian rifle took out 11 snipers in 4 days. Wait, alone? Yeah, alone. The tale grew faster than any official report. Some said he had shot them all from impossible distances. Others said he fought them hand to hand in the jungle. Some swore he moved like a shadow, appearing behind enemy lines as if he were invisible. The truth was simpler and far more impressive. He relied on instinct, patience, skill, and a rifle he trusted with his life. Within 2 days, the battalion commander arrived in person. A tall, stern man with silver streaks in his hair, known for never exaggerating and never being impressed. Yet even he seemed taken aback when he saw the ridge and heard the reports. That ridge claimed 50 men. 50. And he cleared it in 4 days. Alone. When he approached the quiet soldier, he didn't begin with praise. He began with a question. How did you do it? The soldier, still cleaning the rifle he'd ordered from a catalog, shrugged lightly. They made mistakes. I didn't. The commander stared at him for a long moment. Then finally he said the words none of them expected. Son, you may have just saved this entire advance. Because clearing those snipers meant the American troops could finally move through the valley without fear. Supply trucks could cross, artillery could reposition, airfields could be secured. His action wasn't just bravery, it shifted momentum. One man, one rifle, one ridge, and the entire front line changed. A quiet celebration. That night, the campfire glowed with a quiet warmth. Men sat together, exhausted, relieved, humbled. Some played cards, others polished their helmets or wrote letters home, but their eyes kept drifting toward him, the man who had done the impossible. Someone offered him a tin cup of coffee. He nodded his thanks, sipped it slowly. "Why did you go up there alone?" a young corporal asked tentatively. He thought for a long moment before answering. "Because too many of you were dying." The simplicity of the answer hit harder than any speech. He wasn't chasing glory. He wasn't proving anything. He wasn't angry about the mocking. He went because someone had to, and he knew he could. His courage came not from pride, but from duty. And that was what made him different. But something else was coming. As the camp settled into restless sleep, a faint rumble echoed in the distance. The quiet soldier opened his eyes immediately, hand tightening around the rifle beside him. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't wind. It was artillery. Japanese reinforcements were moving in, stronger, larger, and angrier than the sniper team he had defeated. And the American unit, still recovering, wasn't ready for what was coming. The ridge had been the beginning. The true battle hadn't even started yet.
The first light of dawn had barely touched the tops of the palm trees when the ground trembled again. This time the rumble didn't fade, it grew. Deep, heavy, rolling vibrations moved through the soil, shaking canteens, rattling helmets, and pulling every soldier out of sleep. He opened his eyes instantly. No hesitation, no confusion, just awareness. The ridge he'd cleared barely 24 hours ago still loomed behind the camp, but the danger wasn't there anymore. It was coming from the valley, a low, disciplined thunder created by hundreds of synchronized boots. Japanese reinforcements. Big ones. The captain sprinted out of his tent, shouting orders. "Everyone up! Defensive positions! Now!" Men scrambled to their feet, grabbing rifles, rushing toward barricades. Machine gun teams dragged their weapons into trenches. Mortar crews prepared firing tubes. Radio operators shouted into handsets. The calm of the night shattered into chaos. But he moved differently. No panic. No rush. He slipped on his helmet, slung his mail-order rifle over his shoulder, and walked toward the front line with the slow, steady confidence of a man heading somewhere he already knew he belonged. A private grabbed his arm. "You already took 11 snipers. Let us handle this one. You need rest." He shook his head. The ridge was just the start. The private stared at him as though he were carved from stone. The enemy approaches. The first Japanese units emerged through the mist like shadows taking shape. Dozens of infantrymen, helmets low, rifles raised, moving with perfect discipline. Behind them came more, automatic weapons, officers shouting commands, a full formation pushing toward the American camp. They weren't hunting one man. They were coming to reclaim the ridge and crush the resistance before it grew. The quiet American settled behind a fallen log, rested his rifle across it, and watched the enemy advance. His heartbeat didn't quicken. His breathing didn't change. His hands remained still. To the soldiers around him, he looked almost relaxed. "Range?" the captain asked. 400 yards, he replied calmly. "You sure?" He nodded. A machine gun opened up, rattling through the morning air. Mortars thumped, dirt flew into the sky. The Japanese line scattered, regrouped, advanced. Their discipline was frightening. They kept moving forward even under heavy fire, as though nothing could break their resolve. The quiet soldier took a long breath, steadied his rifle, and fired. A Japanese officer dropped instantly. He fired again. Another soldier fell. Then another. He wasn't shooting wildly. He was choosing targets with surgical precision. Officers first. Machine gunners second. Radio men next. He broke the enemy's coordination piece by piece, as if dismantling a machine. "Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that?" a corporal whispered beside him. He didn't answer, because at that moment, the battle shifted. A new threat appeared. From the tree line on the far right, A strange shape emerged. At first it looked like camouflage netting being dragged across the ground, but then it rose, slowly, revealing the long, narrow barrel of a Japanese heavy machine gun. A Type 92. The woodpecker. Every soldier recognized the sound of it, but seeing one this close sent a chill through the line. If the Japanese set it up, they would tear the American position apart. The machine gun crew rushed to assemble it. One fed the ammo strip, another mounted the tripod, another sighted down the barrel. He saw all of this, every movement, and placed his cheek against the stock of his rifle. "Don't let that gun fire!" the captain shouted. But the quiet soldier was already moving. He left his position, sprinting across open ground with his rifle tucked tight against his chest. Bullets snapped past him as he dove behind a tree stump, rolled through dust, and came up kneeling. He fired. The first shot hit the gunner. The second hit the man feeding the ammo. The third knocked the tripod assistant backward. 3 bullets, 3 kills. The machine gun never fired. The ridge erupted in cheers from the American line, but he wasn't listening. He had already moved again, sliding into a new firing angle, analyzing the next threat before the soldiers around him even understood the last one had ended. The battle turned. As the sun rose higher, the fight intensified. The Japanese surged again and again, their officers screaming commands, refusing to fall back. American artillery pounded the valley, but the enemy kept pushing. And through it all, he worked like a machine. A shot, a breath, a shift of position, another shot. He moved with the same patience he had used on the ridge, but now with a deadly urgency. His mail-order rifle cracked over and over, each shot precise, each motion efficient. Men beside him reloaded frantically, shaking with adrenaline, but his hands were steady. The captain shouted across the line, "He's holding the whole right flank by himself!" And it was true. Every time the Japanese tried to circle around, he was there. Every time they pushed a machine gun forward, he took it out. Every time an officer rallied the troops, he dropped him with a single shot. The rhythm of the battle shifted. The Japanese advance slowed, then wavered, then broke. They began to fall back toward the jungle, dragging their wounded, covering their retreat with bursts of fire. The American soldiers held their breath, watching the enemy slip away into the shadows. He lowered his rifle slowly. The ridge behind him was quiet. The valley in front of him was torn apart, and the men beside him stared with awe at the one soldier whose courage held their line together. But the war was not done. As the smoke cleared, the captain approached him, eyes wide. "You just saved us again. You understand that, don't you?" He didn't respond. He simply began cleaning his rifle, wiping away the dust, the heat, the residue of battle, with the same care he always had. Because for him, the fight wasn't about recognition. It wasn't about glory. It was survival. It was duty. He looked up toward the ridge he had conquered, then toward the jungle where the enemy had retreated. Tomorrow, they would come again, and he would be ready.
The jungle was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of silence that didn't mean peace. It meant something was coming. The men in camp felt it too. Nobody joked, nobody smoked, nobody even moved too far from their rifles. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Because everyone knew one thing. The Japanese did not accept defeat easily. And after losing snipers, machine guns, and 2 full attack waves, they would be back. With more troops, more determination, and more fury. He sat on an ammunition crate near the edge of camp, running a cloth down the barrel of his rifle. Every movement slow, precise, calm. The same routine he had done since the day the rifle arrived in the mail. A mail order purchase. A weapon others had mocked. But now, the entire 41st Infantry treated it like holy ground. A new replacement soldier walked past it, pointing at it. "That the famous rifle they've been talking about?" The veteran next to him replied softly, "That rifle has taken out more Japanese positions in 2 days than some units manage in 2 months. Show it some respect." The quiet American didn't react. He only continued cleaning, oiling, checking the sights, preparing. Because he knew something the others didn't. The Japanese had one final attack left in them. And when it came, it wouldn't be like the others. A strange sound in the trees. It happened just after noon. A faint clicking sound echoed from beyond the ridge. Not gunfire, not footsteps, something metallic being assembled. He froze. That was no ordinary noise. He knew exactly what it was. The Japanese didn't send snipers this time. They didn't send infantry waves either. They were assembling a heavy mortar battery, and if they finished it, the American camp would be obliterated in minutes. The captain rushed over. "What do you hear?" He didn't answer with words. He simply stood, pulled his helmet on, and slung the rifle over his shoulder. "Where are you going?" a sergeant asked. He looked back, eyes steady. "To stop them." The final climb. The ridge loomed in front of him once more, the same path where he had hunted the 11 snipers days earlier. But this time, it was different. No cover fire, no backup, no spotters or artillery. Just one man with a rifle against an entire Japanese mortar platoon. He moved through the trees like a ghost, quiet, controlled, steps placed with surgical care. The jungle canopy blocked most of the sunlight, casting green shadows that swallowed sound. Halfway up the ridge, he heard voices. Sharp, urgent, coordinated. They were close. He slipped behind a moss-covered rock, lowered himself to a crouch, and studied the enemy through the brush. 9 men, a makeshift mortar pit, a stack of explosives large enough to flatten the camp twice. He exhaled slowly, then lifted his rifle. The last stand of the ridge. The first shot hit the officer. The second dropped the loader. The third hit the spotter before he could shout a warning. The Japanese soldiers scattered, panicked, unsure where the attack came from. Machine pistols fired wildly into the trees. Mortar shells rolled across the dirt. Someone shouted in desperation, "American sniper!" But he wasn't a sniper. He was something else entirely. He shifted position before they could guess his location. Leaves fell silently as he moved. A single boot print touched soft soil. Then another shot. One. Then another. Then another. The enemy tried to flank. He cut them off. They tried to charge. He dropped them mid-sprint. They tried to set the mortar upright. He put a bullet through the firing pin. It was a duel of patience, precision, and nerves. And they were fighting a man who had already survived 2 wars within a war. Within minutes, the jungle fell silent again. 9 enemy soldiers lay motionless. The mortar pit was ruined. The ridge was his again. The moment that changed everything. He walked to the edge of the ridge and looked down at the American camp far below. The soldiers were running in formation, preparing for the attack they expected to come. But it wouldn't. Not today. Maybe not ever again.
because the Japanese had thrown everything they had at the ridge, and one quiet American with a mail-order rifle had beaten them all. When he finally returned to camp, the captain was waiting. "Did you stop them?" He didn't brag, he didn't smile, he didn't even speak. He just nodded once. The captain stared at him for a long moment, then said something the entire unit would repeat for years afterwards. "Boys, our ridge is safe because he went up there." The men cheered, clapping him on the back, calling his name, praising the rifle, praising the man, but he simply sat down again, pulled out his cleaning cloth, and began wiping dust from his rifle, as if nothing extraordinary had ever happened. A legend is born. Word spread fast. Other units heard the story, then other companies, then entire battalions. The tale of the man who cleared a ridge alone, who hunted snipers for 4 days, who stopped a mortar attack single-handedly. His name traveled through the Pacific like wildfire. He became something more than a soldier, more than a marksman. He became a legend. Not because he sought glory, not because he boasted, but because in the darkest moments of the battle, he acted when others froze. He advanced when others hid. He saved lives when defeat seemed certain. And he did it all with a simple rifle ordered from a magazine. The last night on the ridge. That night the battlefield was still. No gunfire, no shouts, no movement in the trees. He sat at the foot of the ridge under the glow of the moon, polishing the rifle one last time. A private approached him timidly. "Sir, people are saying you're the best marksman in the whole Pacific." He didn't look up. He simply said, "No, I just shoot until the danger stops." And with that, the story of the ridge became part of World War II history. A story of courage, precision, and the unstoppable will of one quiet American.